We do have a ton to get through in this episode.
Common sense is finally prevailing.
There was controversy this month, Dave.
I'm not particularly excited by that.
Secrets and things on set.
I haven't told them anything.
I think this is just good times all round.
Every Doctor Who is liked by somebody, and that's a really good thing.
Davo, my doctor.
I know we disagree on this one.
First world problems, Dave.
I get why fans are asking those questions.
Oh gosh, that's actually quite a lot to talk about.
It doesn't compute.
It's the elephant in the room.
That's okay.
Fandom versus the BBC.
The cardinal sin.
Moving along.
Lunch. Hello and welcome to the Doctor Who show for January of 2024. I'm Dave.
I'm Mark.
I'm Richard.
And as you probably heard there, we have a couple of guests with us. This is Rob's annual summer holiday, but we have with us here Mark from 42 to Doomsday and Richard from Spacefall and the Goodies Pirate podcast and even 42 to Doomsday.
Indeed.
How are you?
Good, how are you guys?
Good. Thanks
great to be here.
Thanks
Yes.
for coming along. We have a lot to cover.
Yes.
Now, our main topic for today, at the end of our last monthly session, we all nominated a story to watch and to discuss.
Yes.
And at the end, you, the listeners, voted for the Ribos Operation 13%, the Androids of Tara 16%, the Robots of Death 33%, but the Keys of Marinus 38%. So we are off to find the Keys of Marinus.
Off to Marinus.
So I'll be looking forward to having that conversation with you. A couple of plugs and a bit of news first as normal. We need to remind everybody that, of course, in just a couple of weeks' time, the Sirens of Audio are doing their Wendy Padbury event. So they are in Sydney on the 10th of February and in Melbourne on the 18th of February. Now, Richard, we went to their last event.
We did with Katie Manning. That was great.
I didn't go, but I heard some great feedback. And for the feedback I heard was like it was a well-run, low-key, good old traditional fan event.
Absolutely, and we're very, very supportive of that. So look, we are going. We had a great time last time. If you're in Sydney or Melbourne, do go to the Sirens of Audio website and check that out because, look, I've seen Wendy Padbury before and she is a great guest.
She is. And as Mark alluded to, look, we had a lot of fun at Katie Manning. I would actually say for a fan-run event like that, Katie Manning is probably the perfect guest, actually, for something like that because she's quite happy to run around the crowd. You remember, Dave, there was a chap right up the back of the room who had his hand up for a while and she came and sat next to him for about 15 minutes and basically just worked
Yep. Everybody who got an autograph or a photo got time with Katie Manning.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's good.
it was good. And
it was really good. It was a nice change, actually, from some of the more sterile events I've been to perhaps over the years.
Yes, move along. Yes.
So, fantastic. Now, unusually for the summer, we actually have a reasonable amount of news. So, Mark, I believe you've got our first story.
Yes, great news for fans of Tom Baker. Not so great news for the season, but we'll talk about that in a minute. For season 15 has been announced, the DVD box set, so it's coming out, I believe, in April.
Horror Fang Rock on Blu-ray on there.
Exactly, so if it's not on blue, it's not poo.
With new CGI routines.
Yes, they looked a bit strange, but we'll get to that in a minute. Look, the trailer was fantastic. It was put together for it. It was great to see Louise Jameson back in the role of Leela, and it was very impressive. That obviously limited amount of money they do have, but it was really, really good. It was a great trailer. I really enjoy those trailers, actually. They really invoke the mood and really look forward to it. From what I understand, though, on YouTube, people check the stats, is that trailer for the season 15 box set actually got more views than the new Ncuti Gatwa season trailer. So, yes, some lines have been drawn there. But, look, let's be honest, I don't think season 15's on anybody's favourite list. But I just love it when it's announced. They're going, why are they releasing now? I don't know whether you guys might know this, but they all are going to come out at some point. So, they're going to mix it all up. And, look, season 15's coming out. And for myself, from that season, it is very uneven, but Image of the Fandal for me is a highlight, and of course, horror of the Fang Rock. It's
Sunmakers.
Sunmaker. Yes. So I'm not a big fan of Sunmakers. I actually find it quite boring. The direction's really flat on it, but
The first half of Invasion of Time.
yes, that's quite good. Yes, and should we talk about the story that we're not really sure, the Voldemort of Doctor Who stories, the underworld?
That'll be there too.
Maybe that'll be your chance to watch it in black and white, Mark, and just see if those stories are true.
Well, they are doing a special edition of it, apparently. It's going to run for 25 minutes condensed.
Look, if nothing else, hopefully we'll get Janet Fielding and Peter Davison watching Underworld and giving their comments. And
Hey!
that's going to be worthwhile.
Yeah, but look, I look forward to these box sets when they come out because it gives you time to sit down, enjoy them, and reevaluate them. So, look, I'm hoping to reevaluate some of those stories in that uneven season. But look, Horrifying Rock will need no evaluation.
Does that need reevaluation?
No.
It just needs to be worshipped.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
And for our regular listeners who are missing Rob's voice, I will point out he has done some YouTube videos on the season 15 box set, particularly its release in Australia, as well as wondering what's happening to season 20 out here, which I believe has been delayed yet again.
Also, check out, please, Rob's OnlyFans page for his other special content.
I might just send that to him privately.
Golden tonsils.
Richard, you've got our next item.
Now, I have a news article here that says, despite fans adamant that it's somehow a bluff, Capaldi doubles down on never returning to play the Doctor. Yeah, right. So, is there actually any substance to this, do you think? Or is this just, they're a bit desperate for a...
Well, it is the Radio Times, and I was desperate for clickbait. But he has said a number of times that he's
I am aware of
back,
that, but I am also quite sure that Big Finish have their 12th Doctor box sets already planned.
Can you imagine somebody, Peter Capaldi, turning up to the Big Finish studios and doing something like Return of the Quarks, written and voiced by Nick Briggs? Can you imagine a man of that stature doing that? No, I cannot.
He won an Oscar.
He won an Oscar. I mean,
Did you know his first movie was Local Hero?
It was. It's a great soundtrack too.
Look, if Christopher Eccleston can do it, I am quite sure that Peter Capaldi...
I think...
there will be a point at which Peter Capaldi...
Look, there might be, but I actually like the fact that he doesn't want to come back and...
shows integrity, doesn't it?
Shows a bit of, integrity, but look, let's be honest with you, right? He was magnificent. He left on a high. He left on a high apart from the Twice Upon a Time thing, but those two stories preceding it, those two stories preceding it are the best Doctor Who I've seen in years, right?
Yeah, great.
And basically he just drops the mic and walks out, so why would you want to come back? He's doing other things, like he's in a new drama that's on TV now.
Well, David Tennant says, hold my beer, but...
I don't see he's a man who wants to come back in a hurry. He's got many prongs and many fires, and I just don't see... I think us fans would like him to come back, and I think there's always that part of us, like him to come back, but I think he's the sort of person who probably won't come back.
Always looking ahead.
Always looking ahead, yeah. Dave, what do you think?
I think that, although the article is trying to beat this up as, making out Capaldi to be a bit of a bastard, I do think that he's saying this for genuine reasons, and he genuinely has his own career and also the integrity of the show to look at. And look, I think that it's not a never say never. When we get to the 70th anniversary, if there's the right show and the right script, maybe he will. Speaking of people who are not coming back to Doctor Who...
Hashtag awkward.
we need to discuss the rumours that have been circulating the internet over the last 5 or 6 days that Millie Gibson is not returning to the show either for all of or part of the second season of Ncuti Gatwa's run. Now, a couple of points that I'll just sort of throw out here. One article has said very clearly that she has been dropped and that she is being replaced as the companion by Virada Sethu, who was, of course, in Andor and very, very good in Andor.
Yep.
And there have now been photos from the filming that certainly is that actress with Ncuti Gatwa, and looks like she's playing a companion type role. Now, there are lots of rumours about whether this is the planned departure after a season or so, and we all know RTD likes to move his companions on after a couple of seasons in a way that Moffat, was more likely to hang on.
Yep.
There are also rumours that this was not necessarily maybe a
planned departure?
A planned departure or a mutually satisfactory departure.
Right.
We don't know. And one of the reasons we don't know is there has, as of our time of recording, been no statement from the BBC or RTD. There's been nothing denying it.
Yeah.
There's been nothing saying, Millie is very excited to pursue other opportunities. There's been none of that. But we have now got photos of Virada filming the show. So something is going on, and it's kind of bizarre that we don't know.
So from the Daily Mirror article, she's appearing in 3 episodes, allegedly, of season 2. That's what they were saying.
Yeah, that's from an insider.
That's from an insider. But you're absolutely right about the lack of press release or anything like that. From a reputational point of view for Millie Gibson, despite whatever's happened, whether she was pushed or she jumped or whatever, the silence isn't great. And in terms of RTD's always been big on having a duty of care to his actors and everything like that. So I'm a bit surprised. But then again, I'm not surprised because Eccleston left under mysterious departure as well. And the BBC put a press release out on his behalf.
Well, having said that, Eccleston, I think, has recently been quite clear about what it...
Yeah,
what was involved,
yeah, exactly.
but-
And to Russell's credit, he hasn't dissed Eccleston or any of the people he's fallen out with during his time on the show as well. But it's very similar to what happened to Freema Agyeman, in terms of when she left. Was it pushed, or was it?
Well, she certainly left before her contract expired.
Well, that's exactly
She
right.
had those guest shots in season 4.
Exactly right, and I think that was a bit of a sop to sort of keep her happy and peer in Torchwood and everything like that. So, look, Freema's was not a well-handled exit either. So, yeah, it's not ideal. But look, if any convention organisers out there, get a panel together with Millie Gibson and Christopher Eccleston on the stage, and I'll be there wherever it is, and I'll be there with a popcorn on the first row.
Just wait for the
and
magic to happen.
And just wait to be more sacks in the Santa's Grotto.
The only thing that would make that panel better would be about halfway through. So, Christopher, John Barrowman's here with us now as well.
Yes. So, it's all very strange, isn't it, really?
It is. I wonder if part of it is just the unintended consequences of filming Series 2 before you've even...
Hard on the back of Series 1.
Before you've even shown Series 1. I think that could be part of it. But, look, Rob and I discussed this back in July on the Doctor Who show when there were all those rumours going around that Shooty might only do 2 seasons. And, look, I said at the time that it could just be a very good bargaining position. Like, no, only 2 seasons. And then they roll the dump truck of money up to Shooty's backyard. And he says, oh, okay, I'll do 3. Who knows what's going on? As I said, it's the silence from the production house at this time that's most bizarre. So for those of you who are fans of the Fat Man Beyond podcast, I've always wanted to say this. Big it up for Mark, he did the news!
Yay!
That's a reference for maybe the 10 people who overlap between our podcast and Kevin Smith's. We now move on to what we're calling our group short topic, because we all just lived through something that as Doctor Who fans we live through from time to time, and that's an anniversary year.
Yes.
So what we wanted to do just for a bit before we get into our main topic is just look back at our experience of anniversaries past and just see how we thought the 60th held up. So look, we could go back to the 5th anniversary special, which was of course the invasion. And look, that's not a bad little story.
It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it is pretty good, but I don't think any of us were even alive then, so...
No. 2 of us, and I won't say which 2, it was you, were at least on the planet for the 10th anniversary, I believe.
Oh, I
Yes.
remember it like it was 1973.
Yeah, all over again.
And look, I just want to make a couple of brief points there, because we have joked in the past about the 3 Doctors being the 9 years and 3 months special. But that, I think, was sort of that example of Barry Letts as the early showman going, I want to structure my season on a big publicity enticing opening.
Yep.
Oh, hey, this is the 10th season. Let's see if Patrick Troughton's free. Oh, and while we're doing that, let's see if Hartnell's free. And suddenly we're going to get, every newspaper cover, the Radio Times cover, we're going to get specials. And that's a good way to launch a new season of Doctor Who.
I always thought, though, they've missed a trick with that, because in terms of the placement of that story, you could change that. Like, you could start the season off with, say, Carnival of Monsters or something like that. I know Barry Letts is always like going big for the first thing. I personally would have held back the 3 Doctors to the end. So yes, have Green Death, because really Joe Grant doesn't really add much to the 3 Doctors. You could actually supplant Benson in that role and it'd be perfectly fine.
Wow.
Or wait for Richard Franklin to become available.
I don't know about that. But, in terms of... So, basically, in terms of the story placement, to build up, I would have actually had that at the end of the season as opposed to at the beginning of the season. Because as you said, it's more...
Would you have held it and shown it closer to the anniversary?
Yeah, I would have put it on the end of it. And then the BBC should have done a repeat on the 23rd.
Because technically the anniversary story is probably the Time Warrior, because that debuts about 3 weeks later. So
yeah, but I would have held back that to the last story of that season. That would have been me if I was in charge back then. But obviously I wasn't. I mean, the 10th anniversary was very UK centric.
Yes.
I think we only had the Radio Times special,
a Radio Times cover, and a Radio Times special. I think that was about it.
And that was about it, So it was very, very, very low key. Obviously, as Dave mentioned, had a bit of media build up around it, but and a couple of Troutman was on some daytime talk shows and stuff like that. But there was no big celebration.
Blue Peter appearance, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the first example of anniversaries happening, of course, The big one was the 20th.
Yeah.
Now, I watched The Five Doctors on Blu-ray last night.
Yeah.
And I watched the transmitted version for the first time in at least a quarter of a century. With the correct music on the harp of Rassilon.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, that's right.
And I've got to admit, look, I had a great time watching that. I
Yeah.
think I genuinely do know that story off by heart.
Yes.
I knew every line as it was coming.
Yeah.
It was nice to look at some of those locations and go, I was there a few months ago.
Yes.
So that was very cool.
Yeah.
I was at the Eye of Orion,
Yeah.
or your home country, Mark.
Thank you. Well, yes.
But that was definitely a proper event, and it was certainly an event outside of the UK as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that because I was looking at the transmission dates actually for the Five Doctors, where you would think something like that. There was tentative. We could do some sort of simulcast, very tentative, within a day or two of each other potentially. But like the Americans got it on the 23rd.
They did, yeah.
They held it over to the 25th of November
That's right.
in the UK for children in need. I actually thought it was, let's say, the 7th or the 8th of December 83. It was actually the 13th of December 83.
But it was an event. I remember
It was
there
an
was
event, yeah.
advertising and everything for it.
Yes.
I remember sort of sitting there hovering over the record button on the night it
Yeah.
debuted, and I missed the probably
Yeah.
first split second of William Hartnell's appearance at the start because
Yeah.
the heads hadn't kicked onto the tape yet.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there was a trailer over the ABC screen, a trailer, but of
Yeah.
course we were getting Doctor Who magazine, or Doctor Who Monthly was back then, and you start reading all the convention reports because
That's right.
obviously the UK actors started going to be pulled by the American money in the convention, so
plus there was Longleat.
there was Longleat as well, and then he started getting books like the Celebration came out, which
That's
is probably
right.
the first sort of celebratory tome in a like it's a coffee table book where
That's right.
anybody could buy it, really.
Yeah.
The general public could buy it and understand the program and the Radio Times as well.
And you-
Technical manual?
Yes, I was going to say you'd remember the ABC ads for the reprint of the Radio Times special and,
Yes.
and the tech manual.
Yes, that's right. And I think in terms of the media attention in Oz, it was quite heavily promoted. There was articles in TV Week, I remember, and The Age, and occasional news articles.
That's
So,
right, because I do
yeah.
remember TV Week had that photo shoot with the waxwork Tom. Can't remember if they sort of gave the sly wink that it wasn't really Tom or not now. I can't remember.
It was
But
called the Big Finish, Tom. But yeah, but those I suppose those seeds of a anniversary
event.
and events
Yes.
were starting to be shown. Yeah.
Yep.
And perhaps also a bit of an indication that Doctor Who had become more than a TV show,
Yes.
a cult,
Yep.
which had positives and negatives
It did.
for the direction of the show.
Yeah.
We move on to the 25th anniversary. Now, gents, I put a poll up on X last week. And I'll read you exactly what I put up.
Yep.
I said, I know what the official answer is, but in your mind, which story was the 25th anniversary story? Now, we got 232 votes on that.
Right.
3% voted for the Happiness Patrol.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
4% voted for the greatest show in the galaxy. 28% voted for the official 25th anniversary story, Silver Nemesis.
Madness.
And a whopping 64% voted for Remembrance of the Daleks.
A bunch of sane people. Yes.
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, I suppose if you want to link it into the anniversary, look, they go back to Coal Hill. For me personally, it probably... I know Silver Nemesis is the big anniversary story and whatever. I'd actually credit Remembrance probably with actually the show retaining me as a fan, I would think, in the late 80s. Because I remember watching season 24 and being really disappointed by it. And I suspect, had the ABC not taken the great decision to show Remembrance after Dragonfire, I have a sneaking suspicion I may well have drifted away from Doctor Who at that point, because...
That's interesting. So,
Yeah.
if what I said about season 10 and they switched the stories around,
Yep.
if they had switched the stories around and started a season, say, with,
What, Silver Nemesis?
God forbid, Silver Nemesis or something like that, would that have... Because what you just said then is exactly what I remember myself feeling. I remember my dad saying when I watched the transmission of it, he
Yep.
goes, oh, thank God Doctor Who's back. So I think, would that have affected people's... I suppose, would they have not come back if they got something like Silver Nemesis being served up as a season opener for season 25?
I think if you were someone who was disappointed by season 24, and look, let me say, we can all look back at season 24 and see some virtues.
Sure, with the benefit of
There's some
hindsight and
green
more knowledge
shoots
about
happening
the
there,
series,
definitely.
of course.
Yeah.
Yes,
absolutely.
but at the time, it was, I think, a disappointment to a lot of long-term fans.
Yeah.
And I think had you come back to the next season with something that's of a similar quality, there probably would have been a sense of, you know what, it's not getting better.
Yeah.
But coming back with Remembrance was just a clear step up in quality.
That's right.
Yeah.
And like you said, Richard, it actually does reference An Unearthly Child. Yes. We go back to Coal Hill School, which I also visited when I was in
Here we go. Name dropper.
There's a copy of that French Revolution book sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
The Daleks are there. They have the reference to the Hartnell Doctor.
Yep.
They have the reference to the Doctor Who about to be broadcast in the afternoon. Like, it actually feels like it was written to be the 25th anniversary.
Correct.
And it's really, I think, only because of a quirk of transmission dates that Nemesis ended up being shown over November.
Yeah.
And so J&T's dropped it in. There's no real sense of that being the anniversary story at all, other than, the spin line of, well, it's the silver anniversary and the Cybermen are silver. There you go.
Yeah, it's pretty lame, isn't it, really? Where, the remembrances ties in so much to that. It evokes a memory, it evokes a feel of the 60s as well. Like,
yes.
Yeah, it is the perfect anniversary story for that year.
Yeah.
And although merchandise wasn't nearly as big in the 25th as the 20th, I do remember getting 25 Glorious
Yes.
Years.
Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
for Christmas that
Yes.
year.
There was
so-
actually a 21st one too. There was The Key to Time. That was his 21st anniversary
that's
book.
right, yeah.
So there was merchandise out there, but I think if you look at those two anniversaries, you can definitely see a lack of momentum by the 25th compared to the 20th.
It was on the
sure.
decline, in terms of the public perception as well.
Actually, there was an album, the 25th.
There
too,
was the
wasn't it?
Keff McCulloch 25th anniversary album. Keff the Hammer. It's called, Hammer Time. It was called. Hammer to Fall. The greatest hits of Keff McCulloch, and it was a stamp set as well. But I mean, only true nerds bought the stamp set. But yeah, it was very low key.
Bizarrely, though, my memory, and we'll see if this is just sort of, where I was in fandom versus the reality, but my memory is that the 30th anniversary in 1993 was actually pretty big.
It was,
Yes.
considering the show wasn't even in production at that point.
That's right. Now, I wonder if that's because those who were still in fandom were very invested, and so, it was all for us, and we did take note of it. But I can remember the New Adventures all did a whole bunch of different stuff, and they were bringing back the old monsters. The VHS releases were very much key to the anniversary, and by November we got the Trial box set and the Dalek box
That's
set,
right.
and they were big deals at the time.
It was. I mean, look, the 30th anniversary even had a dedicated logo.
It had a
It
dedicated
did,
logo.
yes, exactly.
Richard, you were selling a lot of merchandise at the club
I
at the
was,
time.
yes,
And there was proper 30th anniversary
There was proper
merchandise.
30th anniversary merchandise. There's the Cornerstone cards, there was the coffee mugs, there were, all sorts of stuff. There were badges. There was that jacket, if you remember that.
Oh yes, that's
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Have
there
you got
was-
that?
No, I don't think they came quite big enough for me, but...
Okay, right. I think Fraser Hines had one though.
Yes, he did.
He did,
Yes.
yeah.
The TARDIS VHS cabinet.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
yes. Yes.
There was, of course, also the obligatory tie-in books. There was Time Frame,
Yes, that's a good one.
and there was Adrian Wriggleson's book. Yes, but we might just
written in prison.
we might just slide past that.
Yes, but
Yes.
yeah, exactly. And in the UK, I mean, here we had An Earthly Child was rescreened.
That's right, because
right,
I remember,
yes.
yes, that they
Yes.
were doing that poll. Remember the ABC, what story would you like to see? Because the club in Sydney were trying to get all those Orphan Loose episodes screened.
That's right, yes.
From each Doctor, but they went with An Unearthly Child in the end.
Yes, no, I remember going home from high school and An Unearthly Child was being shown
That's
on
right.
the ABC. That was,
that was on.
very, very cool.
And even in the UK, they had Planet of the Daleks on, and beforehand they had those little 5-minute
Oh,
vignettes.
They were great.
They
Those
were
little
really
things.
good
They
to
were
bump
really
out,
good,
and
those
they
little
put on
things.
Planet of the Daleks Part 3 was in black and white on BBC One, which was
Unheard of.
madness, to be perfectly honest with you. And then obviously you had the greatest show that never was, The Dark Dimension.
But no. You've left out Dimensions in Time, Mark.
So both of I want to bring up both of those.
Paradise of Death.
Well, actually, yes.
Paradise of Death. That was.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Pertwee and Sladen and Courtney doing the story.
Yes. And, of course, we've all missed the big one, 30 years in the TARDIS.
Yes.
Or probably more pertinently, more than 30 years in the TARDIS, which, of course, had that clip at the end of Alan Yentob.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
You might very well think that I couldn't possibly comment.
Yes,
Yes.
which, of course,
Yeah.
kicked off a whole new snowball.
So I want to talk about a couple of things that you just mentioned. I can certainly remember a copy of More Than 30 Years being screened at the local club.
Yep.
Yes.
And that being a really big deal, because I think previously we'd had Resistance is Useless
Yeah.
and Who's Doctor Who. They were not great docos, but to actually see those scenes reenacted, to see all those actors we'd liked,
Yeah.
and most of these actors we hadn't seen interviews with before.
Yeah.
So it was a really big deal. It was so lovingly done. But you mentioned both the Dark Dimension and Dimensions in Time. Now, here in Australia, we're probably a little bit further from the news than the UK. And my memory was sort of that these two things got conflated in the reporting, because they both got dimensions in the title.
Yeah.
They were both talked about as being multi-Doctor stories. And I can remember when the club said, we've got a copy of Dimensions in Time, we're screening it, a lot of people weren't quite sure which one it was.
Oh, God.
Plus, you've got to remember, in Australia, we have no real understanding of what Red Nose Day and the whole
that's right.
comic appeal thing is. And so we also didn't know who Noel Edmonds was.
No.
So suddenly, John Pertwee rocking up on Noel's house party was just what's going on? Who is this guy and why does Pertwee hate him? And then we watched Dimensions in Time, and look, I can now take it as a funny thing for what it was.
Yeah.
But when you're thinking this is the big independent 30th anniversary story, it was quite a letdown.
It was.
Yeah, it was indeed. And I do remember some of the articles at the time were saying that a few people had rang up the BBC and said, this wasn't the special we were supposed to be getting, was it? And these are the general public, the great unwashed, are ringing in. But with the 30th as well, Dave, I do remember a lot of the media around that was, yes, celebrating the show's 30th anniversary, but there was also a lot of conjecture and also when's it coming back?
That's right.
And I think that's when people actually started asking actively, when's it coming back and things like that. So maybe there was a bit of momentum in terms of, it's had a bit enough of a break. When's it going to come back on the screen? Yeah,
and I suspect somebody from the BBC licensing department was saying, we are earning thousands and thousands of pounds without the show on TV. Just imagine what we could do if there was actually a show.
Yes.
So that was coming through. And even DWM was getting big into it. They commissioned special anniversary stories for the comics. It was a fantastic time to be a fan. We just had no show.
That's right.
Contrast again the 40th anniversary.
Well, hold on. You missed the 35th.
Oh, I don't recall that, but go on, Mark.
Nobody else does either. But there was a Nice Warriors VHS box set that came out to celebrate the 35th
was that
anniversary.
Specifically for the 35th anniversary? Well, there you go. I do remember the Ice Warriors box set, but I hadn't made the link to...
No, me either.
Okay, over to the 40th, Dave.
In contrast again, that brings us to the 40th, which was... My memory is it's the anniversary that didn't happen.
When I was thinking about this the other night, just in terms of where I was at with fandom, this was... And Dave, you'd have been in the same boat. This was probably only a year or two after we really stepped away from organised fandom.
Yes.
I don't think it's being melodramatic to say, look, probably interest in the clubs and interest in the show and everything was probably at its absolute lowest point.
Yeah.
Well, we're 7 years now after the telly movie has
That's
basically not succeeded in getting the show to come back, and we're not quite at the really serious
cusp of the
RTD has got the rights to Who stuff.
Well, that was actually the other point I had, which would be, I think this anniversary probably, had there not been the announcement that the show's coming back into production, I actually think this anniversary would have gone by with just a whimper, to be honest.
And some Big Finish.
Yes.
Well, actually, I was just going to say, the 40th was celebrated in style with Big Finish's Zagreus.
Which, look, I've never listened to it, but people who are Big Finish fans, they hold Zagreus up as one of the greats of the range.
Yeah, well, look, there was Doctor Who, The Legend, that was the
That was the
tone.
book. I mean, and the VHSs were still coming out. Unfortunately, the release schedule was like all the dregs were coming out towards the
wasn't
end
that
now.
by that point?
Yeah,
Yes,
it was like the mutants. And they included Invasion of the Dinosaurs in that sort of last dregs, which is sacrilege. But yes, the titles they were releasing weren't the best.
Look, there was a bit of other merchandise. I know Strictly Inc. did a card set, but of course the thing is, with the stuff going on in the background about the series coming back, this is also the period where the BBC were renegotiating all the merchandise licenses. So I suspect there was probably a bit of merchandise we never saw because the companies who'd been producing prior to 2003, a lot of them had their licenses revoked because, of course, they want to get new licensees and everything on. Because there'd been I do remember there'd been some speculation early in 2003 that the BBC were doing something because suddenly there were several companies who were producing merchandise who suddenly had to come out and say, well, look, we've lost our license, so this is the end of our miniatures range, this is the end of our model range, this is the end of our whatever. And I do recall there being some speculation at the time that maybe the BBC were actually doing something in the background. Okay. Because why on earth would you cancel all these licenses otherwise?
I do remember that, yes.
Yeah, so I think the 40th was like, it was like...
It wasn't the 30th.
It wasn't the 30th, but there was something on the horizon, potentially. We could feel it in our waters, I think.
that something was well and truly with us by the 50th.
Yes.
Which we were all there for, we were all
Yes.
involved with. And look, we probably haven't got time to go through everything that happened in the 50th, but I can remember, obviously, the return of Web of Fear and
Yep.
Enemy of the World was a very big deal. The Richard Marsden book on James
Oh,
Heath,
yes.
Oh, yes.
that was something that we were all very, very excited by and really,
Yeah.
really sort of
Do
reveled in.
you think, actually, just breaking in there, Dave, because you and I, again, had made our triumphant return to organised fandom.
Hold on, ably and abetted by a couple of other people, isn't
Oh, yes, Mark.
And a little podcast called 42 to
it?
Doomsday
Yes.
was founded
Yes.
that year.
Yes, it was. Do you think the 50th would have been that big, probably, for you if you hadn't been around the club?
No.
Yeah, likewise. I was much the same. I mean, I suppose probably because I was putting the magazine together, so of course I was actually sitting there trawling through news feeds
Yeah.
and doing stuff. I mean, look, I do remember there was a big effort for it. You know, there were all those documentaries and there was a lot of the books and there was the thing. And I mean, not only did you get a big anniversary special, and that anniversary special was shown in cinemas.
And simulcast in multiple countries prime time.
You also had a setup episode for it
Yes.
during the season proper.
Yeah.
Plus, of course, there was the miraculous McGann minisode.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
No,
yes,
the
very
doctor.
exciting.
Yes, which and I remember when that dropped because I'm sitting up. I can't remember what I was probably working on Sonic, and there was just this "you need to click on this now" email going around.
I watched it on a train in the UK.
Yeah.
Because I was there and it said,
Well-
McGann. I said, what?
Yeah, well, of course, so
Yeah.
you went to the big 50th thing at the Big 50th
Yeah.
celebration, didn't
Yeah,
you?
I
So,
did, yeah. There was definitely a buzz there. You know, that was actually pretty amazing, you know.
were you one of the fortunate ones who got to meet Tom, or did you
I
get the
did
other ticket?
I did very well. I did see the Tom convention, that appearance. I did see
Right.
that, and I actually quickly met him in the autograph queue.
Nice.
Yeah, and of course I met Phil Modis and Annika Wills. But yeah, it was a pretty amazing event. Like, just the buzz was there. And, you know, you had that Peter Davison spin-off as well, the Five-ish Doctors.
That was fun. I
You
do
know,
remember that was fun.
And
when
it
we
was
watched that.
little things like that that really
Yeah.
added to that
Adventure
fun
in Space and Time.
experience.
Yes,
I've just read all this stuff down about it. You know, you had there's a Doctor Who celebration, you know, and of course, don't forget the after party that happened. Yeah, it was a massive event.
The crossover with One Direction Day.
Yeah, exactly. And Jackie Lane going, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a massive event and never likely to be seen again in our lifetimes.
And look, I've got very fond memories of all those things coming out, but also, as we've discussed before, both on 42 Doomsday and the Doctor Who show, I think all of us kind of fell out of love with the show in Series 6. And particularly around sort of Let's Kill Hitler and that part of it. We were just like, we're not interested. And the anniversary year did sort of slowly get us back in.
Yeah.
And I remember when word went around our group of, you know, who wants a ticket to go see Day of the Doctor at the cinema.
Yep.
I was initially sort of like, no, I'm not that keen. I'm, you know, kind of a bit out of it with the show. But as I got closer, I just thought, you know what? If I go and it's terrible, well, at least I can bitch about it for the rest of my life. If I don't go and it's good, I'm going to regret this. And I went along, and look, I remember as they opened with the Hartnell theme, and the policeman walking down, I just thought, okay, this is going to be quite special.
Yeah.
And then, look, we all had those moments in the cinema, the Peter Capaldi attack eyes, the Tom voice
Tom.
just
I was
coming
going to
in.
say, you
amazing.
suddenly see all these 40-year-old men just got something in my eye.
Actually, it was
When you just hear the voice.
You actually catch your breath, actually.
Yeah.
I do remember, like, everybody's going,
It was a
pretty
really, really
amazing,
special moment. And that's the other thing I just want to talk about with the 50th is that sense of a sort of reconciliation, I think, between classic and New Who.
Yeah.
And it reminded me a bit of being around sort of the peripheries of Trek fandom when Unification came out and Leonard Nimoy turned up in that, and there was that sort of sense of, okay, Next Gen's been around long enough that we can accept it exists, and you know, it's all part of one thing.
Yeah.
And I want to echo a point that Simon made on Flight Through Entirety last year, and that is that I think one thing that annoyed a lot of people like us who grew up as fans of the classic series was when the new series came along, it gave license to a number of stars of the classic series who didn't enjoy their time and didn't really think highly of the series. They didn't want to go out there and just trash the classic series, but now they could trash it by contrasting with New Who.
Yeah.
And we all watched those interviews and those commentaries of like, oh, well, of course, it was terrible in my day and the direction was terrible, look at those effects, but nowadays it's so much better, and nowadays it's really good.
Yeah.
And I can remember watching that and getting a bit annoyed because Doctor Who was a good show. And you look at, like, particularly in the Letts and the Hinchcliffe years, it was an expensive show and it was a well-made show. And I've said about the Letts era before, it occasionally looks like the 1970s but very rarely does it look cheap.
Yeah.
And the same for Hinchcliffe.
Yeah.
There's Hinchcliffe stuff that looks like the 1970s, but it doesn't look cheap and nasty.
No.
And I think the 50th anniversary kind of brought all of that together. You know, us as classic fans, we got the Hartnell moment, we got Tom in there.
Yep.
And I think Moffat, who, you know, has kind of said he doesn't like 62 and could be a bit antagonistic to fans like us at times, he very clearly said, right, I'm going to make an episode for everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of Tennant or Smith, there was stuff for you. But, you know, if you're an old, grumpy old fan like us, John Hurt was there articulating our views. And, you know, like when he sort of saw the Doctor kissing, he's like, does that happen often now? You know, he was doing us. And it sort of said to me that, like, Moffat gets where we're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he likes to mock us. But on this one, he has made the effort to go, this is all of our anniversary.
Yes.
So, look, we could keep talking for another half hour about the 50th. But that brings us to 2023. What did you guys make of the 60th anniversary?
Again, when I was thinking about this, in some ways it sort of just came and went a bit for me, because look, I'm not really involved in fandom or anything now, apart from doing the occasional great podcast, and I can't honestly say, look, I'm hugely like an active fan to the extent that, look, I'm making an effort to see everything on the day of release, or I'm buying heaps of merchandise still, or I'm really keeping up with the news. So in some ways it did just sort of come and go a bit for me. I will honestly say I have only watched one. And yes, don't you dare say you've watched more of them, because I know you haven't, and I am pointing at you, Mark. But look, I will get to them eventually.
Yeah, I mean, we can't deny that they went out there and they gave us 3 new episodes for the anniversary. I think, and Rob and I had this discussion briefly last month as well, it is unfortunate that the 100th anniversary of the BBC happened.
Yes.
Because I think there is a real sense that sort of stole the thunder. That was the one that had the old doctors in it. That's the one that had the big redo and had the master come back.
Yeah, of course.
And so I think there was a sense of diluting it. It's not that there was nothing, there was some good stuff, and there was, I mean, unusually for this list, there was good New Who, but there wasn't a lot of sort of real... Well, I mean, we got the 60th anniversary logo, I guess.
Yes, we did.
So I mean, that happened. So it's not like it didn't happen.
Yeah, the new logo, which is the old logo.
Yeah, the 40th logo, that's right. Yeah. The 30th logo, that's right. Yeah, look, we got the Daleks in colour.
We did get the Daleks in colour. Look, technically very impressive, but badly edited, and the music was terrible. But
and look, we got the re-edit of An Adventure in Space and Time, where at the end of it we get Ncuti Gatwa instead of Matt Smith.
Yeah, and that's only been shown once and never to be seen again. They got some special clearance for that to re-release it. Yeah, apparently, yeah. You've also got all the classic Who actually went on iPlayer, which I actually think was a really good thing.
Yep.
Not for us, because we can't access what we can. But you know what I mean? Like, it's for the UK people, they can get in and watch, go to away for free. So I actually think that's been really good on RTD to do that.
Yeah, look, there was a Big Finish release, Once and Future, for those who follow Big Finish. And of course there was Doomsday.
That's right.
Now, talking about Tales of the TARDIS,
which was lovely.
Yes, it was. It was
great.
actually
pretty
good. In all seriousness, look, did either of you two follow any of Doomsday?
Not a second.
Only
Likewise.
laughing at the covers.
So I'm sorry for anyone out there who did actually get into it and follow it.
All 3 of you.
But look, Tales of the TARDIS, yes, was great, and it was amazing seeing them again.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really sort of, I think, proves the point I want to make about the 60th, which is when you stop and think about all the things that happened, it actually was a pretty successful year. But there was no sense of proper overarching
cohesion
that said that there was in the 30th and there was in the 50th.
Yeah.
So do they need a brand manager again?
Well, I think they've got one, but I think maybe it was sort of slightly low key, because let's be honest, I think there has been a bit of brand damage, from the Chibnall era. Like, you weren't going to get cinema screenings happening for those episodes or anything like that. So maybe they were just trying to do a more lower key sort of celebration to get things moving back up. And maybe. I mean, and I was going to pose this question, with Tennant's return, do you think that sort of stemmed some of the losses, as it were, sort of plugged the leaking dam, as it were, and sort of getting people back to it?
I don't know I'd quite put it like that, but I think the point you're making, Mark, is a correct one, insofar as RTD has made it clear he wants to reboot the series. And if you're going to reboot the series, you've got to stop what's come before.
Yeah.
And having a stop in the middle of the 60th anniversary is awkward timing.
Yeah.
And again, I think RTD's focus, and understandably so, is to reboot the series. We've got Ncuti here. This is a big new thing. This is a jumping on point for the casual viewer. And it's hard to have a jumping on point whilst also having a very nostalgic, fan-wanky
Yeah.
anniversary.
Yeah. And I look forward to Richard watching Blue Yonder and The Giggle at some point in the future.
Same with you.
Another gin tonic?
That brings us now to our main topic, the Keys of Marinus. Mark, you very kindly brought the gin and tonics. We've poured ourselves a glass and we're going to talk about this story. And look, I do promise you guys, next time you come to do this, we will do a Tom Baker story just for you.
No, I'm actually quite glad that your listeners, who I actually initially when the results came in thought they hated myself and Richard, but I'm actually glad they chose something different from a Tom Baker or a colour
True.
story. So I'm actually glad that the Russian bots that I launched failed.
So look, we'll kick into the Keys of Marinus. So we'll start with the place we always start with these deep dives.
Yep.
What are your memories of first seeing it?
Well, I'm fairly sure, and Dave, you might have been there, and Mark, you probably were there too. My memory is I saw it at a local club meeting here in Melbourne. I reckon either late 80s or very early 90s. It was a fairly multi-generation copy, shall we say. But yeah, I certainly remember seeing it there. I didn't get a copy probably until a few years later when I tape traded a copy. But I would be honest in saying I watched it certainly at those 2 points, so in early 90s and probably mid to late 90s. I'd be struggling to remember when I watched it actually since then, to be honest. And look, if we're getting to initial thoughts, look, my memory going into this was that it wasn't very good and it was quite cheap. Mark?
Well, Richard, I'm going to say the memory cheats for me because I don't actually remember seeing it at a club meeting.
Right.
I do remember getting a VHS copy of it from old mate Pirate Pete, if you're listening. Hello. 1989.
So you didn't share that?
No, I didn't because my quality was actually very, very good. I remember saying, this is actually really good quality. So I probably hoarded that to myself. Did a Levine and just kept it on the shelf. And I remember watching it once, obviously then. And then I don't think I ever touched it till the VHS came out, the official VHS, and I probably watched it then. Didn't really resonate with me either. And then I probably gave it another go when the DVD came out. And then probably put it back on the shelf and again, didn't really resonate. I do remember thinking, oh my God, this is so slow. It's quite turgid to get through. What's going on? And I think I made the mistake of actually probably trying to watch it all in one go.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my memories of actually watching it. So I think during my whole lifetime, I probably only watched it 4 or 5, well, now 5 times. So,
Right.
yeah. Dave, what about yourself?
So I definitely saw it at the same time Richard did. I remember going to a club meeting and seeing a very bad multi-generation copy.
Wasn't mine then.
And my memory of watching that as a young kid, I would have been 9, 10 at the time, was really being quite engaged by it. I remember being quite, interested in the Vord as a very different sort of alien species. I'll discuss a bit later on. The episode that I liked most and disliked most when I was a kid are very different to my favourite and least favourite as an adult.
Yes.
I did have very fond memories of it. I definitely got the VHS and I watched it a couple of times. I watched the DVD a couple of times.
Okay.
And I guess as a fan of Terry Nation's work, it's something that I've always appreciated.
Yep.
And look, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about some of the antecedents of his future work that we can see
Yes.
in the Keys of Marinus.
Yes.
But
I guess before you do that, I noticed you've got the Target novel sitting there on the table. I mean, I read that years before I ever saw it.
likewise,
I actually think I got that one fairly early, I think, in my Target collection from
I
memory.
can't even...
But,
Was it any good? I can't even remember it.
well, it's a Philip Hinchcliffe, and they were usually pretty reasonable.
yeah.
Published in 1980. My biggest memory of the Target novel is the cover, which
Yeah.
tells you absolutely nothing about the show. It's a very ordinary TARDIS over a very nondescript planet.
A grey
Yes.
TARDIS.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just I remember just sort of going into that going, I have no idea what this is going to be about.
It's not selling it, is it, really?
It's really not. Now let's talk about the Keys of Marinus. Now, it is the 5th story ever of Doctor Who.
Yep.
Or to be perhaps more accurate for those who saw it going out, it was episodes 21 to 26 of Doctor Who. And,
Yep.
and we now link this as the Keys of Marinus.
Yep.
But I think for viewers at the time, it wouldn't necessarily had quite the same sort of link.
Yeah.
It's the first time a writer is brought back to the show.
Yep.
Yes.
Terry Nation, of
Yep.
course, having done the Daleks.
Yep.
And John Luke Rotti would be the second, very next story.
Yep.
One of the things that I think we need to talk about straight off the bat is the ambition of the story.
Yeah.
Initially, when I was putting together my notes, I thought this is a very early, possibly the first example of what were they thinking, trying to do a different location every episode
Yeah.
and a different set. But of
Yeah.
course, if Marco Polo existed, they did exactly the same thing.
They did, although I think they reused and redressed some of this. Well, when they're at the way stations and whatever, you just sort of put the walls together in a slightly different configuration
With a different backdrop.
Yes.
Yeah.
But certainly this is 14 episodes in a row with a
Yep.
different location every one. Now, okay, the first 7 are all in ancient Cathay.
Yep.
But it was just such an ambitious thing for a show to do.
It was. That was one of the notes I had. I sort of, if you just watched what unfolded on screen with no context or no knowledge of the history or anything, it looks remarkably cheap. But, of course, when you sit down and you think about it, and you think about how Doctor Who was made back then, and Ray Cusick says something similar if you watch the doco on the DVD, it is an incredibly ambitious story that, a new location every week.
Yeah.
It totally wrecked their budget. And, he got into trouble for, overspends, and then they sort of complained that the things didn't look good enough, and it sort of, well, hang on a minute. I've got to come up. I've got a week to come up with a set of ice caves,
Followed by a jungle, followed by a futuristic city.
That's right. You know, so with that context, look, you can applaud, to be honest, the sort of balls, if you like, to do something like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there are episodes where the production works better than not.
Correct.
I certainly noticed when I was watching it back over the last week, it's very obvious that every next episode they arrive, next to a very blank set.
Yep.
Because they obviously couldn't have the next one set up. There are moments of this where it does look cheap. And when I watched episode 1 back earlier last week, I did message you guys and said the production team was not having a good day this day.
No.
Now, part of that is, of course, it wasn't designed for a bunch of sad fans in their 40s to sit and watch it 60 years later.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, compare it to the Daleks, compare it to what we've seen of Marco Polo and some other stories, I do think that the director did drop the ball a bit on this one in terms of the direction.
Yeah.
And Richard, on Spacefall, a Blake Seven podcast, we have spoken occasionally about when you sit down to really watch a show and really analyse it, you can sometimes see where a director gives what we've called a that'll do performance. And there are a number of shots in the Keys of Marinus that I think John Gorrie, who only worked on the show for this one, he was giving a bit of a that'll do performance. And I think it's interesting when you look at the relationship between Ray Cusick and John Gorrie here, the director who only did one story for Doctor Who, he didn't come back.
Burn out.
But when you look at the relationship between Cusick and Christopher Barry and the Daleks, which, look, I love the Daleks, I know that there are people with pros and cons about it, but that is, again, a very ambitious show where the sets and the design works really, really well for 1964. I get the feeling there wasn't the same relationship between Cusick and Gorrie in this one. And Cusick was really trying to push the director to go a bit beyond a that'll do attitude. And Richard, you referenced the doco that Cusick has the interview on, where John Gorrie was happy for a Vord just to sort of fall backwards through a door and that was it. And Cusick said, well, hang on, the script says he falls into a pool of acid.
And you need to show that he's dead.
You need to show that he's dead, you need to show what happens. And look, that shot isn't the best shot in the show, and we can talk about,
But it's something.
It's something, and how much money do you spend on a 3-second shot on a black and white TV to be shown once?
Yeah, that's right.
But Cusick is clearly trying to push the director further than the director wants to go. And there are just a number of shots where stage hands are in there or a line is fluffed.
Yeah.
And you just get that sense of a director going, that'll do.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because I think Cusick is really trying to deliver on those sets.
Yeah.
And some of the ideas are brilliant. I think some of the morpho designs are
Yeah,
really,
they're
really
fantastic.
strong.
Yeah.
So I think that the cheapness doesn't come from the design or the ambition, but from perhaps the direction.
Yeah. It's almost like John Gorrie's taken a book out of the Ed Wood School of Directing, where that'll do, move on to the next shot, know. But
For Spacefall, we would say the George Spenton Foster School of Directing.
Yeah. I always think of Keys of Marinus now, looking back on it, it's almost like the pre-Key to Time, isn't it?
It
Where
is.
You're
It
doing
is a
that,
quest.
The quest is a quest.
It is a
but
quest
done
story
better.
in 6
Chase,
parts.
Dalek Master
Yeah. I actually think jumping around those different locations actually makes it interesting.
It does. I watched it an episode a night, so over about a week.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think that was a lot better than trying to watch it in one sitting.
Yes.
Look, you can see its flaws and whatever, but at 25 minutes, none of the episodes really outstays its welcome. You do sort of get to actually, we're nearly at the end of this one. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gone quite quick, actually.
Yeah.
And I do love the idea, and it's a very Terry Nation idea, that we're not going to a planet and the entire planet consists of about 6 people in one city, in one location. There's a real sense that, and And you see the map of Marinus when Arbitan gives them their destinations. There are these cities all across this continent, and they've all got a different climate, and they've all got a different civilization.
Yeah.
And you actually feel like you've gone to a real planet.
Yes.
And when they get to the city of Millennius, like, they're very aware, obviously, that there are other parts of their world, and they probably trade furs with Vasor's mates and all the rest of that. Like, this is a planet that has a functioning society.
Yeah.
And for 1964, that's actually really impressive.
But isn't Terry Nation not very good at names, is he, really? Like, naming things like, locations and planets like Millennius and Iridius and Desperus. You know what I mean? Like, come on, Terry, push the bad out a bit, son. Yeah. Also, with this story, along with Android Invasion, it's the only story that Terry Nation wrote that featuring the Daleks.
There you go.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah,
So there you go. But I think early into Terry Nation's run, it's actually it's not bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not bad. But what are there any sort of key memorable moments for you in the series, both of you? Any key episodes even?
It's interesting. We're still very much in the early episodes where the hero really is Ian.
Yes.
Because he carries a lot of the narrative, particularly because we probably should also mention that this is William Hartnell gets a holiday for a couple of weeks.
He gets 2 weeks off,
He gets a 2-week holiday.
Yeah. Yes. Just after the one in Marco Polo where he sleeps through a sandstorm. It's unbelievable he slept through that. Yes, Hartnell was on holiday.
Yeah, so Ian is very much left to carry a lot of the narrative.
Yeah.
That's correct. I did notice that. But you can also see that switch starting to happen because when you get to part 5, it's the Doctor who has the big hero's entrance.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, the Doctor's here to save the day.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So we are in that. And look, I thought William Russell, he is great.
He's
in
magnificent,
this.
actually. I wrote down, I said he was actually great in this.
He is great in this. I'd be honest and say I didn't get a lot out of Susan.
Oh my God, yes.
Barbara was quite good. Once we got into the City of the Morpher, Barbara was actually quite good in that. I really enjoyed Jacqueline Hill in that. But no, I didn't get a lot out of Susan.
No. You actually can see in Carol Ann's performance that she is subconsciously saying, I'm not staying around. Because it is, as being promised like an Avengers girl, and to be reduced to that, and it's not not satisfying for an actor, and certainly not satisfying for an audience participant either.
No, that's right.
So, Mark, you mentioned before sort of favourite parts or favourite episodes, and I alluded to my evolving views. Look, I probably should say my favourite episode has been fairly consistent, and that's episode 2. I just think that the Morpho City...
Oh, yeah. That would have been my pick too, I must admit.
It's a really good concept. It's really well realised. The Morpho brains are just a really creepy...
Yeah, and the voices are creepy too.
Yeah, really well done.
Yeah.
As a kid, I really loved the Jungle episode and couldn't stand the City of Millennius episode. I think I was like, the Millennius episode was just... Boring.
Yes.
And whereas the Jungle stuff had this really cool concept, whereas that's probably being reversed now.
Correct.
I think the Jungle one is now
the worst.
quite poor and quite badly realised.
Yeah.
Whereas the crime procedural of the City of Millennius, and look, Terry Nation loved a good crime procedural and got them in where he could. But as an adult, I get a lot more out of that now. So those two have really flipped.
Yeah, and the performance of Hartnell as the lawyer and the the defence attorney, as it were, he is fantastic in that. Where if you say, in contrast to say Doctor and other trial scenes where you've got Tom Baker in stones of blood, got the wig on, taking the piss out of it, and Colin Baker, calling people knackers yard and whatever, where Hartnell is giving its full rumpole of the Bailey, as it were, and brings a whole lot of gravitas. I hate using that word gravitas, but he's really good at it. You know what I mean? And the defeat on him when he knows he's lost, Ian's case, and he's just sort of sitting there slumped in his chair, and he goes, he's really sort of taking it hard. Yeah, I really actually felt for the character.
Yeah. And the Doctor's the one who works out the mystery.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And of course, Barbara works out the other part of the mystery, although she does have the help of that classic detective show plot thing of nobody mentioned murder.
And with that ding-a-ding-a-ding.
I actually thought you were going to go with the non-soundproof door, which is another Terry trope. But
look, I actually thought that episode worked far better than I did as a kid.
Yeah, for sure. I must admit, I would think if I'd seen that probably in as a youngster, I'd have been bored stupid. I think by part 5 particularly.
But those court scenes, I do remember watching them at the first couple of times, and I thought they were absolutely terrible. But like you, Dave, my opinions completely switched. And the screaming jungle is actually left me. It's more carry on screaming. I think towards the end of it, it wasn't one of my favourites. But can we talk about The Snows of
Snows of
Terror.
Terror.
Yes.
I think The Snows of Terror holds up pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's quite as strong as a couple of the other episodes, but I think it holds up pretty well. I think, again, as you mentioned there, Richard, William Russell's performance is absolutely sincere, and what could have been a bit of a farce, he sells.
He does. Yeah, particularly when old Vazor's getting a bit rapey and...
Yeah, actually, watching that, Archie was really uncomfortable watching that, actually.
Yeah.
And especially when he says the line, "I can't wait no longer."
Oh.
And I'm going, gee whiz, okay. And
Yeah.
when they arrive on wherever it is in Iceland,
In
as
the
it were,
snow,
in the
yeah.
snow, right?
In the Snows
the
of
music cue they used is very similar to what was used a couple of years later with the Ice Warriors.
Yes, I know
You had
that.
the soprano.
Yeah.
It wasn't the castrati from the End of Time. It was the soprano, and that sort of high pitched. Soprano-y voice, very similar to what was reused on the Ice Warriors across 6 episodes. But yes, let's talk.
So is that ice music, is it? Clearly?
It could be,
But
yeah.
this wasn't Dudley Simpson.
No,
So,
no.
yeah.
So it was very interesting. There's sort of connection there. But let's talk about the scene at Mr. Rapey, as it were, Vazor. Vazor. Look, it was very uncomfortable watching it, and especially when he uttered that line to me, "I can't wait no longer." And I think even in one of the other later episodes, you hear the doors close, and there's quite an audible slap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that we've discussed on the show before, that the Hartnell era really has that sort of sexual content that nothing else in the show has.
No, that's right.
No.
But I do think that as uncomfortable as the Vazor stuff is, and it is surprising looking back at it now, as a kid I never picked it up. And
No.
I think if you're old enough to know what rape is,
Yeah.
you're probably not old enough that you're going to be shocked.
Yeah.
And even as a teenager, when you conceptually know what rape is in theory, you don't have an understanding of like the horror of it.
No.
So I think that by the time you're old enough to be confronted by it, you're old enough to cope with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even in a time meddler.
Well,
that's
that's
supposed to be
right,
a comedy show, a comedy series, and you have that awful scene
right.
in there. So it's quite, again, those contrasts. But yeah, I don't know whether, maybe we can say, it was brave back then, but to be honest with you, that sort of stuff was in the TV there anyway. There was physical violence against, women and that sort of stuff.
No one blinked at the Keys of Marinus.
Nobody blinked.
that's right.
No, absolutely at all. But yeah, mate, but now obviously with that... with hindsight and everything like that, and hopefully, society's got its own issues, but you're sort of looking at a different lens now and go, yeah, it's slightly uncomfortable, but yeah.
Now, I mentioned that this is only the 5th story of Doctor Who, and we talked about the evolving character of the Doctor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's talk about the end of part 1, where Arbitan says, "I desperately need your help to save my planet."
And they say no.
They say no. It literally just cuts from, "I really need your help," to, "I feel really bad we're not going to help him." And he then forces them to do it. And as Lawrence Miles has said, it's not until the Sensorites, which is the first time where the Doctor says, "There is no need for me to stay. I've got the TARDIS back. Everything's okay. I've cured Ian. I'm going to stay and help these people because it's the right thing to do."
Because I'm good. Yeah.
We're not there yet.
No. Even though there's that gradual softening of the character, it's still that selfishness, like, I've got to get back to the ship and get away. This is all, too hard, as it were. But
he wants to explore initially.
Yeah.
He's fascinated by the glass sand and the acid sea and all the rest of it. But yeah, he's sort of like, "Well, look, I've seen your planet. I don't like your planet very much. Goodbye."
it's almost
time to
like,
leave.
nah.
What did we think of that initial setup? Because that was something I can remember as a kid really fascinating me. And I think that when you look at all those old textbooks, that have the 2-sentence summary of stories or the program guide, the whole like acid sea glass sand was something that everyone kind of hooked onto, even though when you watch it back now, it's very clear it's actually not a feature of Marinus.
It's just around that island. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's actually, a novel concept for back then.
It is.
In terms of those defences he's put around.
Yeah, and you see they've clearly gone to the effort of making the glass submersibles.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
perspex. But they look really good. And I have to say, the model work at the start, where you do that pan across the island.
Yeah, it's great.
And you see the submersibles coming in to dock or
And
to land.
And not only do you see that, you see several of them coming very smoothly to land.
Yeah.
And there's one that's obviously struggling.
Yeah.
Which we infer to be the one that the Vord got covered in acid.
That's right. And that's quite well done. I mean, look, it's hard because on a big modern TV and whatever, unfortunately,
shows.
You can see everything. But I mean, and indeed going back to that doco, as Ray Cusick said, they did do it deliberately because they knew at 405 lines
It'll be
on
fun.
an old TV, it would be invisible.
It's the magic of Doctor Who, isn't it? It's just the magic of that of television, of that vintage at all, and films as well. You know, you just take in the context it was made, and you just sort of move past that. It's more the story and the characters and get you engaged. And if the effects work, it's great. I mean, Terror of the Zygons, for example, is a brilliant story. The effects sucked. That one effect. But does that ruin the whole thing? No.
One thing that I think does draw the story down on rewatching is that Terry Nation has gone for the moment rather than the background. And look, he's invented a very interesting system of societies and a very interesting planet.
Yeah.
But he hasn't really sort of worked out exactly who the Vords are and how they work.
No,
and
they are
how
a
the
bit
conscious machine
inconsistent.
works.
Yep.
Yeah. There is some inconsistency there. But again, they're weird, they're alien, they're bad guys. That's what you need.
They look pretty impressive, actually.
They look different.
Yeah.
Which is good. I did sort of note watching this that there were a number of sort of sci-fi cliches or Terry Nation cliches, but then I reminded myself this is 1964.
So they're not cliché.
They're not
That's
cliches.
right.
This is brand new for him. It gets cliched later on.
No, absolutely. And you can sort of see that freshness in his approach.
Yeah.
Now, a number of these ideas are recycled later on. I think
Yeah.
you look at some Blake Seven episodes that are very similar to that.
Yeah.
Crime procedural.
Yeah.
He completely rips off the Morpho Brains with Same On in the Web.
Yep.
Yeah.
Incidentally, the most downloaded episode of Spacefall. And I think this is the first example of a Taron on the Terry Nation
yes,
story.
probably.
So yeah, look, a lot of Nation ideas that you see come through there, but him not writing a Dalek story, I think comes off and really
It does, actually. Yeah, it does.
And, he has to sort of reach for something else. And I actually think they did a good job on it. Yeah, I think it's actually really good. It's funny because like the last couple of months, I've been watching a little bit of Billy, actually. I watched Edge of Destruction. Instead of watching An Earthly Child on the anniversary day, it's like, let's do something different. Watch Edge of Destruction. That was really good. Hartnell is always, to me, underrated. Even though I know he makes the fluffs and everything up, but that just sort of makes the character endearing, doesn't it, really? And he really gives a great performance. I'm really quite... I'm actually going to go and watch some more Billy.
Okay. Very good.
I was actually really impressed with this.
No, that's really good. So look, both of you came into this a little bit down. In Mark's case, quite down on the story, not without good memories.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it now?
It was something I watched. No. Look, I did enjoy it. I haven't watched it for a long time. And look, I did enjoy just sitting there for, half an hour at the end of the day each night, putting each episode on.
Yeah.
And no, it's really good. It'll probably be a while before I watch it again, I think. But no, it was quite good for what it was.
It's been a change for me because every time I've been asked to review stories, I go and watch, I always go the ones I really, really think are fantastic and come out really slightly disappointed. So this time round, it's actually been the complete reversal where when the poll results came in and my Russian bots had failed, I thought, oh, God, here we go. But this story's been a massive turnaround for me, and I think that the key is to watch an episode a day or every couple of days.
Yep.
And, don't go into one big stretch. And there's some really good stuff in it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And this story's definitely gone up high in my estimations, and I'm actually going to go and watch some more Billy.
Yeah, look, I like this story going in, and I still like the story. It was very obvious watching it on DVD on an 85-inch TV.
Yeah.
The production flaws were very obvious, and
Yeah.
I think that does put it below stuff like the Daleks
Yeah.
and some other stories in Season 1. But it's very enjoyable. It's just classic 60s sci-fi where you can do anything. There are no rules yet. You can do anything. It's great watching Hartnell in this. It's great watching William Russell in this.
Yeah.
And just again, particularly coming out of the 60th anniversary, as I said, seeing that slow evolution of the show, seeing the Doctor slowly soften, seeing the Doctor become the hero, but we're not quite there yet, was really interesting. So I really enjoyed it. I'm going to give it a B+. What about you, Mark?
B+. Well, I actually would probably give just a B-. I mean, it was very, very good.
Yeah, probably about a B-, maybe C+ for me as well.
Yeah, definitely on the improve. Yeah, certainly from this previous grading.
There you go. Well, look, I did promise next time we did this we would watch a Tom Baker, but maybe we'll go out there and watch something a bit different next time you guys are over.
Absolutely.
Time in the Rani.
Maybe not that different. So, look, that was our thoughts on the Keys of Marinus. As always, if you have views or comments, please do reach out over social media or email. Speaking of which, we have a couple of emails which have come in over the last month. Richard, you've got the first from Alex Wilcox.
And Alex writes, "Hi Dave, hi Rob. Your top 5 stories where humanity is the monster was really excellent. One of your best and most thought-provoking. So you provoked 2 lines of thought in particular from me. First, that you're absolutely right about almost any pure historical. The one that came to my mind was the massacre, an event so terrible it's why we still use the word that way today. While also that there are so many to choose from, but especially, even if you didn't snap, that you both went directly to one particular point in Who, and so did I. Way back in RTD Season 1, there was so much optimism and enthusiasm about humanity, and yet he also kept digging underneath that. And I wonder if something just switched after his master said goodnight to children everywhere with, "Human race, greatest monsters of them all." Because from the season immediately following that story, you chose Planet of the Ood and turned left, and both times you were so close I thought, oh, but surely. Maybe you both tended towards what you might call institutional monstrosity, while the most disturbingly real monstrosity for me came with ordinary people in a group turning on others. It's the only TV Doctor Who episode I've ever seen before broadcast, a select special screening for politicians. I always assume a pointedly deliberate choice by RTD, for which a friend at a Liberal Democrat think tank thought of me and gave me their ticket. So I still have very vivid memories coming out of it, talking it over with an MP I knew about how raw it was then. But like your turn left, it's become more true and so much harder to watch every time since 2016. So each of you and I went directly to Series 4 to find humanity as the monster. And for the effect it still has on me, my number one choice will always be Midnight.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, Russell T Davies is now promising new Doctor Who as a lovely big hug. A feel-good show to hold up against a tough world where we're constantly shown terrible things happening. And maybe he's learned from that. And maybe by writing It's a Sin and Years, he can channel Doctor Who into something different. But I wonder, how will this determination hold out for another 4 years? Don't have nightmares, Alex.
Thank you for writing that in, Alex. I've got to say, I think Rob and I both really did enjoy doing that particular list makers. It's interesting that I hadn't realised before, but a lot of the ones that we came up with for that category, as did Alex, are actually very highly regarded. And maybe there's that's not purely a coincidence. Mark, we have an email from Ben Scoville.
Yes, Ben says, "Hi guys. I recently discovered your podcast, and I think of all the Doctor Who podcasts out there, yours is the best. Of the other two podcasts, I'll mention two others. The New Old Doctor Who Show, and Two Who Watch Who, and 42 to Doomsday. Though I... Sorry, you can edit that out, Rob. Who make many bizarre and weird observations, but I find them very entertaining. However, I am annoyed sometimes by other podcasters who are rude or dismissive of the people who work hard to bring our favourite show to life. The format is a challenging one, and the creative risks taken to produce something special will also risk producing a stinker. And whilst we may/should be critical, we should also be respectful of the effort of those who seek to entertain us and keep our favourite show alive. I've been a fan since the mid-1970s. Tom and Davo were my doctors, but I've not been involved with fandom this century. I used to be a more committed fan in the early 80s. In those days, I would buy Doctor Who Monthly/magazine and the Australian fanzine Zorinza, and I still have many of those issues. Revisiting these publications 40 years later, I'm impressed by the quality of the contents.
Well, Mark, you probably wrote some of those.
Not for Zorinza, but certainly we probably read some of them out on our drag from the archives, maybe. For example, Zorinza provided some interesting information from fandom in Australia at the time, including the initial fan reaction to the cuts to Caves of Androzani, the reviews of the 18th and 19th seasons, and the fan surveys for those seasons and beyond. Also, there's the opinions and agendas prevalent at the time provided by contributors such as Pat French, Anthony Howe, and Stephen Collins. In these Australian publications, there were some pointed things said about the direction of the show at the time. Nothing changes. Common themes included the dissatisfaction with the end of the Graham Williams era and the work of Chris Bidmead, with Logopolis being described as abysmal, trash, pretentious, puerile, nonsensical, and pathetic. Also, one article, Zorinza 3031, blames Myers Department Stores Australia and their treatment of Peter Davison during his Australian tour, along with J&T's Americanisation of Doctor Who, for Davo's decision to quit the role. I forgot... That's actually quite funny. I forgot all about that stuff, but reading it again now after all this time, I wonder how much of the fan outrage is acknowledged now. I don't know. I stopped watching Doctor Who around 86-87 when I got engaged, and consequently I've missed out on the 7th Doctor era. Recently I've gone back to those episodes and have enjoyed them. Not only that, they are also enlightening. Enlightening because in them I have found the answers to the Mrs. Flood mystery within the Dragonfire serial. I draw your attention to the little girl who at the end of the episode watches the TARDIS disappear and then faced onto the camera smiles. For me, there's no question that the girl somehow, doesn't matter how, tracked the Doctor back to 1963, Next Stop Remembrance, and waited 60 years. The timeline fits. It's my conspiracy theory, and I'm sticking to it. Ben Scoville. Thank you, Ben.
That's as good a theory as any about who Mrs. Flood is. And look, thank you very much, Ben. I'm glad you've discovered the podcast. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And look, if you do like hearing stuff dragged from the archives, and particularly a special episode all about Davison's Australian visit, there's a podcast for you, Mark.
There is. 42 to Doomsday, we did a special episode on the Davison tour where we talked to a couple of people who actually went there. And yes, sort of a blow-by-blow description of that time. I can't remember, though, if we pointed out that was the decision where Peter Davison quit, being stuck in a Myers department store signing books with the Great Unwashed. But it was actually quite a lot of fun putting that episode together. So yes, thank you. Give it a listen if you care to partake.
I've got a few other comments that have come through to us. One on our hot take of the church on Ruby Road from @Who Catalogue. The Christmas special was hugely underwhelming for me. I enjoyed it a lot, but there's far too many elements that detracted from the experience for me. Having rewatched it once, 3 hours later, I can say those elements are more forgivable than I found on the first watch, but nonetheless a bit painful to have to admit that. If anything, this was a fun episode with a fantastic performance from Shooty and Millie. Shooty is 100% the Doctor, and I cannot wait for season 1. Actually, I cannot wait, I mean May. Seriously? So, yeah, look, I'm very keen to see what Shooty does with an episode. I was also underwhelmed by The Church on Ruby Road, and you guys haven't watched it, so I won't ask your opinion.
No.
I'm sure it'll be great.
We have a couple of comments on our Kanon and Company episode. Richard, one from Dylan.
Meow meow.
And Dylan writes, as someone born many years after this, I'm 24, I somehow can't help but feel nostalgic watching this oddity every year. It has its flaws, but I love the fact it's basically a Tales of the Unexpected episode with Sarah Jane and K9 in it.
That's a fair call.
I actually had this... I actually taped it on the end of the tape that I had the Five Doctors on.
Yeah.
So I did actually watch K9 and Company in the years after when I would watch my copy of the Five Doctors. Quite often I would drift into K9 and Company afterwards. So I did see it several times.
Because was that transmitted in 84 here?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was about a year later. And I think it was because there was obviously about an hour left at the end of the tape after the Five Doctors. So I had that on the same tape.
Okay.
There you go.
Meow meow.
All right, Mark, over to you.
Doris Day. Hello, Doris. Dankeschön. I recall Central Park at fall. Sorry. Doris Day says, heresy maybe, but I've never seen this. I've got the DVD somewhere, so I guess I should dig it out. Whenever I've seen this being discussed, it's usually the title sequence that's under scrutiny. Yeah, funny about that. Anyway, Happy New Year to both of you. Thank you for all the great podcasts over the last 12 months. That was from Doris Day. Meow meow.
Well, I was going to say the theme tune that is immortalised as the theme tune to the Fortune of Doomsday fanwave segment.
It is, yes. Yes.
So that's it for our feedback for January.
Excellent. It's good missives there.
We'll quickly just do a segment of what have we been watching, Mark?
Well, obviously we've had a bit of a break over the summer, so it's been nice to sort of reflect on life and have a bit of time.
We'll watch the Keys of Marinus. But
We'll watch the Keys of Marinus and Edge of Destruction, obviously. Actually, I watched Underwater Menace. That was mad as a box of frogs, but anyway. But in terms of other televisual events, I just watched the Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, which is a UK docudrama, I think you said, on an IT implementation gone slightly awry in the UK. And having worked in IT for over 20 years, I was not surprised but appalled by some of the things going on there. But apart from that, it's a really well done drama, very entertaining, and it's one of those shows I just sort of binged in 4 episodes. I watched the Harlan Coben series on Amazon Prime called Shelter. I'm halfway through watching it. That's actually really good. And also watched another one he's just put out called Fool Me Once on Netflix as well, which are a bit of a crime mystery sort of things. That was great fun, but also I've been watching Ted on television, the new televisual episodic adaptation of that with my son, and we're laughing in all the inappropriate ways. How about you, Richard? What have you been watching?
I'm actually really boring because I've been watching a lot of older series, actually. I've recently been back through New Scotland Yard, John Woodvine. And, yeah. That's like early 70s.
Right.
They've been great, actually, to see. I remember them being on TV when I was young, and they've been really good. I mean, look, they're very 1970s.
Yeah.
they're great series, and there's quite a few really interesting guest casts and that turn up in that. I did see some of Dr. Death. My wife was watching that, and I did wind up.
Oh, is that the first one or the second one?
She was watching the second one.
I haven't seen the second one yet.
Yeah, so I did wind up watching some of that. I've been through the new Reacher.
Oh, yes, very good.
Yeah.
Yes.
And probably the older stuff, I've actually been rewatching some of The Bill. I've been back, we're sort of around the season 6, season 7, so we're firmly in the Burnside.
The
era.
Imperial phase.
The
Imperial
peak
phase.
and yes, peak Burnside.
Yes.
Yeah, very much so. So we're coming up, I've just been picking odd ones to go through. We're coming up, about to go into season 7, which I think the big thing there is that's when Ted Roach leaves.
Yes.
I think, but look, they've been really, really good to watch them again.
I've rewatched some of those Bill episodes, particularly that sort of 4, 5, 6, 7 era.
Yeah.
And there are some excellent scripts in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Just amazing scripts. In fact, Richard, we've often talked about doing alternate galaxies on the Bill, and maybe we need to put that on the agenda for.
Maybe we should
lock it in.
Yeah, maybe we should actually. Plus, I've started. It's about my 4th rewatch in over an extended period, but I've actually started working back through Callan again.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I was actually packing away some DVDs, and I found my Callan DVDs.
Right.
I sort of actually, it's been quite a few years since I've watched these, so sadly there's only 2 episodes left from the first season, so I'm at the end of the monochrome ones now. Look, it's very dated. I mean, it's very sort of reads under beds, and those crazy East Germans wanting to defect every week and whatever. So
Yes.
But look, it is a great series. Edward Wood, he is amazing, Edward Woodward.
Yes.
And I must admit, I'm very much enjoying Russell Hunter too as Lonely.
So a couple of mentions from me. I did over Christmas watch the new Disney Plus series, The Artful Dodger, and I have to admit I really enjoyed that. It took a couple of episodes to really get into it.
Yep.
But that is really, really good. David Thewlis as Fagin is just as good as you'd expect. Thomas Sangster has long been on my wish list for the Doctor, and this is absolutely confirmed that. It's set in colonial Sydney. So the premise is basically that Fagin and Dodger in different ways have basically been deported to the colonies. And the Dodger is trying to use his finger skills as a surgeon, and Fagin's trying to lure him back to his old way. So look, I actually really quite enjoyed that. And a couple of weeks ago, I was in Japan, and whilst in Osaka, I did go and visit the Osuma Tezuka Museum, which is dedicated to stuff like Astro Boy, Akimba, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And look, that was absolutely fascinating. I grew up on the 1980s Astro Boy series.
Now, did I see there's a convention or something here where I think that the voice...
voice.
Yes.
The
lady who did the voice for Astro Boy is coming.
I think it's the lady who did the English
Right.
dub.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but yes, there is something like that coming out.
Yes.
Look, I have over the years, every now and then, sort of watched the 3 or 4 Astro Boy ones I remember quite well. But I've now started on a proper great journey and watching them all in order. And there's some really, really good stories in there, but it is so dark and bleak. And Azuma's concept of robots with a soul and robots with a heart means that you do get these really emotional beats and these really sorrowful beats. But, I mean, look, let's face it, the whole series starts with a scientist kid getting run over.
Yeah.
And then the dad yells at his robot son, and he gets goes away in sorrow and gets kidnapped and deported to another country. So it's pretty dark in there. There's an episode there where half of humanity is wiped out by invading aliens, and it ends with Astro Boy's brother Atlas having to basically commit suicide to take them out. So it's pretty heavy, and I am occasionally shocked, and again, this is something Rob and I have talked about, that I would have been 3, 4, 5, and every morning getting up before school and watching a story about a robot with a machine gun in his ass.
They would have been... Is that like Gatchaman, though, that they would have been edited for the West? Is that...
Not nearly the case. So, episodes 1 and 2 of the Japanese version were edited into one.
Right.
And it's funny watching that because there are callbacks to some of the stuff that was edited out in later episodes.
Yeah, okay.
Which is very, very weird to watch out. As a kid, I just remember going, so what's that about? That's a flashback to something that didn't happen.
Yeah, because I just debating. I remember Astro Boy being on, but I can't say it was one I really got into. But going back sort of a few years earlier than that, when you had Battle of the Planets in the West, and then you watched the unedited Gatchaman episodes.
Yes, where all the stuff's been taken out and they've added 7 Zark 7 to make up the time.
Yes. There is a marked difference, shall we say, in terms of content. So
Yeah, no, Astro Boy is much, much closer to what was shown in Japan. So
Right.
it's surprisingly full on. But I'm really enjoying that. And I know that Rob's a big fan of anime, so I'm sure
Yep.
we'll have a longer chat about that next month. Before we talk more about next month, Mark, Richard, thank you for coming along. Is there
Absolute
anything
pleasure.
you'd like to plug while you're here?
42 to Doomsday has taken one of its habitual hiatuses at the moment. So we are planning on a couple of specials hopefully this year. But all of the episodes are there, all 100 and whatever there are of them, all on the feeds if you want to go and check them out on 42 to Doomsday on your local podcatcher feed. They're still there.
very good.
Richard?
Well, I guess we should plug Spacefall, shouldn't we?
We should.
Yes, and there are new episodes coming soon, I promise.
Yay!
Yes, no, we are recording your episode, so we'll be getting into Series C over the next couple of months.
We will. While we're on Blake 7, I will give a plug to a book I received just after Christmas, which is the Blake 7 Series A production diary.
Yes, I've ordered that, but mine has not yet arrived.
Yes, now I will say massive kudos to Jonathan Helm and Graham Robertson, who put that tome together. That is an amazing book. I am having a great time reading through that. I have long felt there's been a gap sort of on that detailed making of book around Blake 7, and look, my dreams have finally come true. It's great. It's a big, nice, glossy coffee table book. It's full of, if you followed the Making Blake 7 Twitter feed, it's got all the great pictures and everything in there. Probably my one negative is because it has to go in book format, unfortunately some of those beautifully restored upscale pictures that he was that they were posting on the Twitter feed, unfortunately had to be compressed to get them in the book. But this is an amazing tome, and if you are a Blake 7 fan, look, it'll cost you about 120 or thereabouts to get it printed. It's print on demand through Lulu, but mine came from the States, but it is well worth it.
So when you've been reading it, the things in there that you've never... That new information for
Yeah,
you?
there is. It is basically a day-by-day breakdown of how the first season was put together.
Right.
As I said, if you were following the Making Blake 7 Twitter feed, it's very much in the same format.
Okay.
So on this particular day, Terry Nation came in and this is what he discussed with Ronnie Marsh at BBC Centre. You jump forward a bit, these are the actors that they interviewed that particular day for the role of for the various roles.
Yeah.
I believe the Series B volume is coming either later this year or sometime next year. So
fantastic.
That will automatically be on the order list.
No, I'm very keen for my copy to arrive. And of course, if you're a fan of the goodies, all three of us, plus our mates Tom and Rob, appeared on the Goodies Pirate podcast, where we go through every episode of that classic TV series with various regular segments, including guest cast, goodies tropes, and our favourite, what couldn't you get away with today?
Which is a lot.
Yes.
Which is a heck of a lot.
Now, coming on the Doctor Who show in February, we'll have our list makers coming out in a couple of weeks. So our topic this month is stories where part one is great and then the story tapers off.
Hello, Android Nation.
Underworld.
We will also be doing the first of our Alternate Galaxies cold takes. Now, Rob and I have really enjoyed doing our Star Wars hot takes on Alternate Galaxies and some of the new series of movies that are coming out. And we thought, why not go back and watch the prequels and just see what we make of them in 20 odd years later. So we will be doing our first cold take on The Phantom Menace shortly, followed by Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith over the next couple of months. Look, I haven't watched these properly for quite a few years, and I'm genuinely quite interested to see what they are. Rob has said that he will talk about Star Wars at the drop of a hat, so I think that'd be cool. I think that'll be quite interesting.
Just remember the special effects age faster than anything else.
That is very, very true. But for our main show in February, we will be doing a deep dive, and we did promise on this occasion it would be into a new Who series. So we will be putting a poll up at the end of this episode for you, our listeners, to once again vote for which new Who series we're going to talk about. Now, Rob has sent in a nomination, which is Series 5. Mark?
Series 10, please.
Series 10. Richard?
Well, I'll go down the other end of the pool and I'll pick Season 3.
Okay.
Fair enough. And I'm going to go Series 7A.
7A?
7A.
That's oddly specific.
So we have nominations for Series 3, 5, 7A and 10, and that will be up on our Doctor Who Show Twitter feed about a day or two after this episode comes out, and that will be what Rob and I will be watching and discussing in a month's time.
Please let me know when that poll's up. I'll release the bots again. And hopefully this time they'll work for Series 10.
No, fantastic. Thank you very much to Mark and Richard for coming on.
Thanks for having us. Good fun.
It's been fun.
It's always a
been
pleasure
fun.
to have you. It's always fun to do this summer special.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
We will. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to
The Doctor Who Show with Rob and Dave.
Find us online by searching for.
The Doctor Who Show.
We also love it when you write in. Drop us a line anytime at hello@thedwshow.net.
Keep punching!
Set course for Moffat.